Greetings and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. and I am the Homeless Consultant. I appreciate you watching today. This video is going to talk about what it is like to live in a car, specifically in the context of how I interact with other people around me. And to help this move along, I want to make some key points right from the very beginning. And please keep these points clearly in mind as I talk about some specific experiences of mine. First of all, I want to point out that because I'm always parked in this car and almost always sitting in this car, I can't leave my valuables. It's all I have in the world. Because I'm always in this car and people who travel regularly around the areas where I'm at, they see me, people know that I'm homeless. It's more than obvious. I have a very distinctive car. There's all this junk in here. They can see me sleeping in here. People know that I'm homeless. First thing to keep in mind. Second of all, I see what you don't see, because I'm here all the time and I observe things while people just come in and they leave, they come in, they leave. I'm observing the big picture. I give an example in another video of where like for instance a pickup truck and two prostitutes came in at different times and entered both sides of the truck to service this guy. Meanwhile, some mother with her, little like 5-year-old girls out there just walks out right next to the truck or pretty close to the truck, putting their groceries in there. The little girls just milling about, and these people don't even realize what's going on right next to them. But I see these things. You don't. And I've encouraged people to spend a day sitting watching a parking lot somewhere, and you will be shocked by what goes on around you all the time and you don't know it. Third of all, I have to remind you that I have to start my car in the winter. I have to start my car about once an hour for about 10 minutes to heat the thing up. If it is sub-zero, I really have to leave the car running all the time because it will equalize to the temperature outside within minutes. And it's unbearable. It's absolutely unbearable. In fact, right now already my toes are frozen, and I was running the heat before I started this video. The consequence of that is that it burns a lot of gasoline. I can spend $10 to $20 a day just on gasoline alone without ever moving my car. If you wonder where my money goes, there's a big part of it. It has destroyed my engine. My starter, battery, alternator, the belts. I mean, it has just destroyed so many aspects, leaving my engine running basically all the time throughout a winter in Minnesota, which is about 6 months long, half a year. Basically having my car running for the last 2 years almost all the time, except, when I was working at the truck wash during the day. If I don't start the car within a couple hours, 2 to 4 hours, and I never know when, what that range really is, the battery will die. And then I have to get someone to jump me, or I have to pop the clutch, push the car or something. My emergency doesn't brake, so I can't park on a hill. If I could park on a hill, then I could just roll down and pop the clutch. But the emergency brake doesn't work. If I didn't have to start my car all the time to heat it up, it wouldn't matter, right? But when I start the car, I need an emergency brake, or else I have to keep my foot on it all the time. You can kind of see how all these build up to just be nothing but trouble for me. Because my engine's so mangled from running all the time, when I do start my car after it's been off for quite some time, like an hour, it makes just absolutely horrific noises. And every time I do that, it draws attention to me. The people around me turn and stare, and it isn't a good stare. Number 4, I want to point out that it's difficult for me to document the threats I'm going to talk about. And what I mean by that is like filming it with this camera. And the reason is because if there's someone out there who's a threat, I can't take the risk. I'm in a place where I sleep. It's one of the few places I've found where I can sleep without being molested by others. I can't take the chance of ticking one of these people off, one of these threats. If they see me filming them, my life's at risk, and I'm not going to do that. So it's pretty rare that I can really document what I'm talking about here, but I am able to, as you're going to see a couple examples here. Number 5, people generally view me as a threat for no other reason than because I'm homeless, because I live in this car. They view me as a threat. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no reason for it. It's just something in their mind. Number 6, yet the real threats out there, believe me, are threats to me more than to anyone else. Because I'm always in this car. I'm exposed, I'm vulnerable. Nothing but windows and glass around me. The real threats that are in fact out there are not me. They are threats that threaten me. And if you don't, go favorite search engine, search on violence against the homeless. You'll get a taste of what I'm talking about. For the most part, all of these threats that I'm going to discuss out here, for the most part, all of them live in a nice warm home. And nobody looks at them as if they're funny, as if they're a threat, as if they're a zoo animal. Nobody looks at them that way. But they're the threats. I'm not a threat to anybody. And I'm stuck living in a car, and I don't want to be here. I also want to point out that the list of people who have been homeless include Abraham Lincoln and his family, Billy Joel, and countless famous artists, movie stars, singers. Veronica Lake, after she was famous, became homeless. Also, Jesus Christ was homeless. Do a search on famous homeless people and see what you get. The fact that you're homeless means nothing. It only means something to the people who see you being homeless, which is my next point. I didn't change when I became homeless. I'm the same person. Same sense of humor, same goals in life, same desires, same character. It's other people, their opinions of me, their attitudes toward me, their assumptions about me all changed the instant they could call me homeless. So please keep those key points in mind as I go through these experiences of mine, so that I don't have to rehash them every time. That'll speed things up. Now, I've mentioned some of these in my video series, How Not to Do Business. So I wanted to put it all in one place for people who are more interested in the homeless aspect than the business. That's why I'm doing this video. And so, as I said in that video series, when I'm sleeping in this car, I pull the blanket over my head for privacy, to keep the light out, and also to keep the heat in. And when I do that, I sleep with one eye open, because there's a very good chance that at some point during the night I'm going to hear this. Often I'll hear a sound out there and it wakes me up, and I'll open an eye and I'll just look around without moving. I'll look and kind of see through the blanket when it's lighter outside than in here, and I'll look for moving shadows and things. And what I often see is a very bright spotlight shining around, moving around in my car. And when I see that, I know it's the police searching my car before they make contact with me, and then within a moment I'm going to hear this, and it always happens. Now, again, I don't have any problem with the police checking up on me. They're making sure I'm safe. They're making sure I'm not dead. They're making sure I'm not a threat to people around. And that's okay. I have no problem with that, as long as the police handle it responsibly. In the jurisdiction I'm in right now, that I've been in for the last several weeks, it's a very good police department. I like these people. And I count that as an opportunity to meet a new officer when that happens. Other jurisdictions, though, they have not been so nice. And that becomes a problem. A big problem. Not going to talk about that here, but just realize when you go to sleep, you don't have to worry about, someone coming up, and especially if you live alone, you shouldn't have to worry. If someone comes up and taps on you to wake you up, is that going to make you wake up nice and comfortable, or are you going to wake up, shall we say, excreting a brick? Because that's what I get when I'm home sleeping. Let me talk about internet access for a specific reason here. I only have two feasible, that I've found, I only have two feasible sources of internet access, and I need it for things like uploading this video, research, to the extent that I can do anything toward getting a job, which, for reasons I'm not talking about here, but in the state of Minnesota, that's just not, I'm not allowed to work, basically. It's illegal, or it's unethical. I mean, they put so many roadblocks in the way, you can't really do it unless you violate something that I find terribly offensive, and which could in fact put me committing felonies. Whole nother story. My point is that I need internet access. The only two places I can find, one is the public library, The other is a restaurant, a particular restaurant. Now, the problem with the library is that it has very short range. You know, this is government. Very short range, so you have to park in one of the spaces that it's right next to the building. Now, by definition, if I do that, then all the people who are going in and out are going to pass right by my car. They're going to see all this junk in there. They're going to see me in here with my computer. It's pretty obvious I'm homeless. That's embarrassing. It's humiliating, and these people act as if they're uncomfortable with that. Also, the service itself is terrible. It's very slow, doesn't handle bandwidth well, and it has all these filters on it, you know, because it's a public access. They don't want you accessing this website and the other thing, because, you know, grown adults aren't able to, you know, choose where they're going to surf. For example, the other day I was searching on human resource curricula. I was looking for the curriculums at various colleges for human resources for an upcoming episode of the business series. And I was hitting a filter saying, you know, I don't know what, you know, inappropriate website or whatever. While I'm searching on that, you know, I can't get any research done in an environment like that. With the people walking around me, these filters, the slow connection that keeps turning on and off and on and off. So I skipped the library, and yet whenever I talk about needing internet access, everyone, the first thing out of their mouth, why don't you just use the public library? Well, there's reasons for it. It isn't any good, for one thing. What I do use is a restaurant that is open about 6:30 in the morning till around 10 at night, um, and they have very good, strong signal. Bandwidth isn't a problem. It still takes a long time to upload, but that's YouTube's issue. So here's the thing. If you look at my video called Thanksgiving Special, The Making of How Not to Do Business, in that video I give you a day in the life of me as I'm making a video for this business series. And I show you the just tremendous amount of work and effort, obstacles I have to overcome to get those things even done at all. And one of the things I point out is that in the state of Minnesota, in winter, this is the shortest days of the year, and we're at a very high altitude, so the sun is low in the sky at its highest. And what that means is that if it's a sunny day, which in this winter here in Minnesota means it's very cold also usually. If it's sunny out, it's usually very cold. Whereas if it snows and it's overcast, it's actually not as cold. But the point is, when the sun's that low, it casts all kinds of extremely harsh shadows, and my windshield on my car is on this steep angle. So as I'm sitting back, you know, I'll be all in shadow, or I'll have these really harsh shadows all over me that move over time as the sun moves. I can't film that way. I can't put something like that online. No one's going to want to watch it. I mean, I'm sure you don't want to really watch my face one way or the other, but you know, I can only do what I can do. And I guess I could wear that beard again from the trailer. The point is, the only time the sun casts light that I can really effectively work with is plus or minus an hour or two around noon. So 2 to 4 hours is the maximum I can record. And that sets a timer, because once I record within that time frame, I then have to edit it, which takes a long time, takes, you know, about as long as the video itself. I then have to render it into a single file, MP4. Then I have to watch it to make sure that it's what I think it is, that everything turned out okay, and only then can I upload it. Now, because the sun dictates when I get to start this process each day, I usually end up with it somewhere around 11 o'clock at night until maybe 3 in the morning. Somewhere in there is usually when I'm able to finally have everything done and I'm confident I can upload this. So I'll go to this restaurant to upload, and the thing is, if it's late, and YouTube is very slow at uploading, very slow, takes about as long as the video itself, I can often be there when the people arrive in the morning to start setting up to open in the morning. So what they see is a guy sitting in their parking lot with a computer up there, and that doesn't make anyone comfortable. I understand that. I have no problem with them thinking that's strange, because it is the middle of the night. Now the thing is, after that happened several times, I thought, well, I've got to let them know what I'm doing. And kept meaning to catch someone as they were going into the place, but I didn't want to spook them because it's dark and it's overnight. So what I did instead was during the day I went in and I asked for the manager and I talked to her. I introduced myself and I told her what I'm doing. I said, I live in that car out there. You've probably seen me. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I live in the car. I don't want to live in the car. I'm doing everything I can to not live in the car, to get a job, get out of this mess. It requires me to use the internet, and I'm so sorry, but I've been using your internet. It's a very good connection, and I'm doing all I can to be respectful of it, not to use it during business hours and things like that. And she was okay with that. She was okay with that, and she really appreciated that I came in and told her about it. Now she knew who I was. But the thing is, she said, she did tell me, we were about to call the police on you, which is not something I want to hear, because I don't do things wrong. I'm not a threat. I'm just trying to survive. I understand why she would say that, but it's hard to hear that, because again, I'm the same person I was before I became homeless. That was a person who no one ever called the police on or had any reason to call the police on. I don't like hearing people say, we were about to call the police on you. But the fact is, that's what everyone out there wants to do, is call the police on me. And I'm not even doing anything wrong. I didn't change. They did. Now, it's understandable in some cases. In this case, I'm more or less hijacking their internet. I get it. I understand. That's why I went to talk to her. To me, that's the responsible thing to do. It's all I can do. And it worked out well. Now, the point about her saying we were about to call the police on you, though, is where I want to take this from. People look at me very differently because I'm sleeping in the car. So, for example, I was at Walmart one time and I'm sleeping, I'm leaned all back, have the blanket over me, and I'm sleeping. And when I wake up, like that one video I did shows, the first thing I have to do is check out my environment. I have to figure out where I am, because I don't necessarily know where I slept the night before on a given night, if I have to move around. And I also need to evaluate, are there any threats around me? So I usually kind of get up quickly and look around. Anyway, so I get up, take the blanket off, and standing right in front of my car is what looks like a classic Minnesota soccer mom. Quintessential soccer mom. And she's holding the phone camera, filming me sleeping, and she pulls it down right away, and then she, was totally flustered. She turned in that direction, which was a bad move because there's nothing there but a little island of dirt, and she's pretending to film this island of dirt like that was her purpose. And then she turns the other direction, facing away from me, and walks over toward her car. I look over there, and right next to me is her car, and her son, who's probably 12 or 13, he's also looks like he's putting away his phone. This all happened very quickly. So he was probably filming me too. So this Minnesota soccer mom, instead of teaching her son how to help the homeless, she's teaching him how to mock and humiliate the homeless. And I bet you there's 2 videos of me sleeping in a car somewhere on YouTube. This is what I have to deal with. Now, who's the threat? Me, who's just sleeping, doing what my body requires? Or these people? They live in a home. I sleep in the car. People are staring at me all the time in this car as I'm making this video, and I try to keep my eyes on the camera, but I can see out of the corner of my eye, and sometimes you'll see me look away, and I see these people, especially when they're driving by. People often make special trips to drive by me when it makes no sense for them to do so, because there's nothing here, there's no entry or exit. The only reason they're coming out in this direction this far is to be near me, because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And they stare, which is very, very rude. I was taught that when I was a child. Don't stare at people. It's very rude. But they do it nonetheless. It's very disconcerting. A lot of cars, when they come to check me out, they'll drive by and they're driving, and they'll watch me and they'll just crank their heads and watch and stare at me as they're driving along. Now, what does that mean? That means they are operating a motor vehicle, moving forward with momentum, and they're looking in that direction. Now, first of all, I think that's against the law. Second of all, it is unsafe. Third of all, it's extremely bad manners. And fourth, those people live in a home. I live in a car. They are the threat. If there's a small child running around out there that they don't see when they're doing this neck craning thing, they're going to run over that child. Not me. I'm sitting in a car or sitting in a car sleeping. They are the threat. Now, there is one thing people see me do. I have to admit, I give credit where it's due and I take blame where it's due. Although this isn't really blamable, but there's one thing I do that I can understand why it draws attention to people. Since I've been living in the car, I can't play guitar anymore. You know, my electric guitars, I can't do anything with it. The little guitar I have in here is so small, it doesn't have a lot of frets, it really doesn't work, and there's no room. So I've started playing my drums again and going back and kind of getting my chops back, learning my rudiments. So I will sit on the steering wheel and I will practice, you know, if I can. But, you know, I'll try to do that, and that's going to look really strange to people. But oddly enough, that looks more normal than me just sitting in the car all the time. Because, you know, people sit in their car, sometimes they take a break and they drum or they play a harmonica or something, you know. Oddly enough, people don't look at that as being as strange. But I can see how that would draw attention to people, or draw attention to me. But for the most part, I am treated as a zoo animal, as an exhibition. People look at me, they point, they laugh. I mean, I see it all, and it's horrible. Where I'm usually at, the places that I can be are not upscale. If I'm anywhere near an upscale area, I will get visited by the police, and it will be harsh. It will be a removal scene. It will be about getting me out of there, because the wonderful, housed, rich people aren't going to allow someone like me anywhere near them. Now, they don't know who I am, so when you talk about someone like me, they don't even know who they're talking about. But you know what? They don't care either. And that phrase, "they don't care," is the key point. So where I'm at is usually surrounded by what you might call Section 8 housing. And if you're familiar with Section 8 housing, you're dealing with people who did not go to Harvard, let's put it that way. They probably didn't even go to high school. You're dealing with low income, low education. Now granted, some of it is people who, like me, get into really hard times and they might indeed have good education and all that. But the fact is, Section 8 is associated with welfare, basically. I have not accepted welfare. I don't want to be dependent on the government. I want to work for a living. I've said that all along. I want to work and earn my own living. I live in a car. Those people live in a home. These people are walking by me all the time because of my locations. They are not very nice at all. They do the neck crane thing when they're walking, staring at me. They glare at me, and a lot of them are these kind of gangster types. Although they're not gangsters, they don't seem to know anything about what a gangster was, but they call themselves gangstas. And they're always trying to intimidate. They will do things like take a special walk over near my car when it isn't necessary to get from where they're going, and they'll walk right in front of my car very slowly. I mean so close that I wouldn't doubt they're touching the front end of my car. And while they're doing it, they turn their heads and they look right at me with this really mean look. And I have to deal with that all the time. There's nothing I can do to stop it. They're free to do that as much as they want. Some of these guys do it several times in a single day. When I'm sleeping in this car, what do you think's happening? They're walking right in front of me. Do you see why it's a little difficult to sleep? Because that's the kind of thing going on outside while I'm sleeping. I'll tell you one story that's kind of along these lines. I think 2 nights ago, I was leaned back about halfway in my car. It was nighttime, so it was dark. It was about 8 or 9. I was in the grocery store parking lot where I've been recently. The grocery store was still open and hopping. Lots of cars in the parking lot. I was watching a video, and I don't know if it was one of mine, again, testing out my video, or if it was something else. I don't remember, but I was leaned out halfway, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm backed up against an embankment, and with snow on it, although snow's about melted now, but one reason I do that is because it's the least likely place anyone's going to come walking over. It just doesn't make any sense when you see the other side. It doesn't make any sense. But I was leaning back, and all of a sudden I see these shadow figures come walking by both sides of my car at the same time, and then they bust out making noise. You know, the yelling and talking and laughing and whatever these kinds of people do. It was like a gang of teenagers. They're all dressed in black, black pants, black hoodies. Couldn't see their faces. 3 on this side, 3 on that side. So close they could have brushed up against my mirrors. And they just came out of nowhere. Just scared the daylights out of me. And as they walked by, they would in turn turn and look back. You remember that Bigfoot video, the Patterson video, where Bigfoot's walking along and looks back and just kind of glares at him? That's what they're doing with me. Now in this case they didn't mess with me directly beyond that, but why do you think they ended up walking 3 and 3 from an area where no one would, in their right mind, would ever cross in the first place? They walked over to the parking lot and I lost sight of them when they went into all those cars. Several minutes later, this gang of 6 comes running across the parking lot, pushing a shopping cart, and they're off to my right, they're running for that direction. They shove the cart at some point and they just take off running over the embankment. Meanwhile, a police car comes in right at that time, drives over to the shopping cart. And I look at the shopping cart, and what do you think is in the cart? Stuff like this. Stuff from people's cars. You see, with 6 of them, they can rob 6 cars at once if they find 6 open cars. And then they can throw it all in a shopping cart. And in the time it would take one robber to rob 1 car, they can rob 6 cars. Apparently they didn't quite get away with it. They left, and that's why the officer went straight for the shopping cart. That's my assumption of what happened. I can't imagine what else would have caused the scene that I saw there. This is going on all around me, and this kind of thing happens all the time. This is what I have to deal with in the place where I'm living and sleeping. This doesn't happen to house people. I'll tell you one thing about those 6 punks, though. They weren't carrying duffel bags. They weren't carrying backpacks. I didn't see a toothbrush sticking out of their pocket like there often is out of mine. I bet you they have a home. I bet you they have a place to sleep. I sleep in a car, and I don't want to. I've said before in my videos, I have gotten to know the art of the drug deal by just observing them, because they happen all the time. Remember what I said before, I see things that you don't see. I see drug deals go down and people from the suburbs just park their car right next to someone's probably in there selling, you know, who knows what, what's the big one today, meth or something, or crack. I mean, they'll pull in next to each other, one will pull in, the buyer will pull in, they'll wait a second, someone will get out of this car, they'll go into the back seat of the drug dealer's car, which always has really highly tinted windows. There's nobody in the front seat except the driver, but they get in the back seat. They're in there for a minute or two, and then they slip out and they get in their car. The dealer drives away slowly, not drawing attention to himself, and then the other car goes the other direction. Stuff like that. Meanwhile, they're doing all this right next to your car while you're in the grocery store, and you never have any idea it's even happening. I have to sit there and watch this all day, every day. I'm really tired of watching drug deals. You know why? Because A, both the buyers and the sellers have much nicer cars than I do. I see no evidence that any of them don't have a place to live. These are not homeless bums buying these drugs. In fact, most of what I see are young people, very young, as in the high school students. Perhaps like this kid who was learning from his soccer mom how to film the homeless. Kids like that, they're the ones who are doing these drug deals. I'm going to tell you a story here. This is from a year ago, back when I was in another part of town. I had a place, a regular place where I was sleeping in a parking lot that I could kind of get away with without too much trouble. It was nighttime, dark. I'm pulling up to the parking lot and it's about 50 feet away, the turn, 30, 40, 50 feet. So I'm slowing down and it was a slow 30-mile-an-hour street already. Meanwhile, as I'm looking over there, I notice that there's a hitchhiker on this side, and I barely even saw him hitchhiking, and when I went past, then I heard him like screaming at me. So I pull into the parking lot there, and I get into my usual spot, and I wasn't even settled in everything. This guy comes stumbling, and I mean stumbling, over to my car, and he's just furious. I mean, he is really furious, and throughout the course of my dealings with this guy twice, he did this kind of thing, and he was threatening to kill me because I didn't pick him up and drive him where he wanted to go, which, can you believe it, was 50 miles away on the other side of the Twin Cities. I pulled to the other end of the parking lot, which was by a restaurant, and went into the restaurant in case we had to call the police, because I don't have a phone. I'm this exposed to these kinds of people, and I don't even have a way to call for help. And this guy, of course, staggers and stammers his way over there and follows. Then he comes in and starts threatening everyone in the restaurant. So they call the police. The police grab him. They say, yep, he's definitely on something pretty nasty. And they take him away. And you know what? That guy had a warmer bed and a better meal that night and the next morning, I'm sure, than I did. Because I'm sleeping in a car, eating bread, drinking water. If I'm lucky, I can put some peanut butter on that bread. Alright, the next topic. Oh boy, this... In all the time I've been living in the car, and I've been in various parts of the Twin Cities area, I've seen something consistently. At around the time before businesses start, noontime, and at the end of business hours, so like 7 to 9 in the morning, noontime, and then 5 to 6 in the evening. There's a certain creature that comes out and goes into these secluded areas, like the very kinds of places I try to be in. But the reason they're out there is so that they can sneak a cigarette. So you're dealing with closet smokers. And the state of Minnesota propagates a hatred, just a mind-boggling hatred against smokers unlike anything I've seen anywhere. I mean, it's very much like blacks would be treated in Mississippi in the 1950s. I mean, it's just bile, blood-spitting hatred. And they've done things like, tax the wazoo out of tobacco, and then the money goes to the same hate groups who called for the taxes, and then they take the money and they give it to the legislators who pass the taxes in the form of campaign contributions, and then they stick it in their pocket. I mean, it's just a corrupt system of hatred and stealing money from smokers all around. For me to see all these people everywhere I go, and some of them are like in medical industry. I mean, they're wearing scrubs and probably doctors and nurses. For me to see these grown adults having to go out and hide as like a little kid behind the shed smoking a cigarette, not only does that fill me with nothing but contempt for this incredible machine of hatred that they have in Minnesota for smokers, but it's really sad to see what these people are having to go through. I mean, they look like they're just ordinary people. They're working a job, and maybe their workplace doesn't allow them to smoke or something, but for one reason or other, they're coming out at lunch, before work, after work, to have their cigarette. Now, I found a place to record because a police officer actually recommended this place to me. I wanted a kind of quiet, secluded place to record. And the officer said, well, here's where I go to do my paperwork. It's pretty nice and quiet. So I went there and I liked it. And for another reason I'll mention in a moment, I liked it quite a bit. So I was there for about 2-3 weeks every day during that window of time when the sun lets me do anything, which is lunchtime. And the reason I liked it is because there was one of these closet smokers who pulled in, and she would be there for the whole lunch period. And she's a lovely woman. She's a beautiful woman. Now, I never met her, never talked to her, we didn't even wave. I think we smiled at each other a couple times as she was leaving or whatever. From her perspective, as far as she knows, I'm just out on my lunch break too. She doesn't know I'm there the whole time. She just knows I'm there the whole time that she's there. Now the thing is, again, she could be married with children. I don't know, and frankly, it's the way it is. Nobody's going to want anything to do with a guy who lives in a car. So it isn't about meeting her or flirting with her. Well, maybe flirting. Flirting's always fun, but again, I don't know if she's married or what. The point is that it's comforting to me to have someone near me who I feel like I can trust. Like they are not a threat to me. She's out here for a purpose that I know what her purpose is. She's sneaking a smoke. That's what she's doing. She's not here to stare at me. She's not here to mock me or to film me sleeping. She's here for her own purposes, and that makes me feel comfortable. And then she probably felt just as comfortable with me because she's assuming that I'm out on my lunch break. You know, even though she's seeing me do things like this, probably wondering what that's about. But working on a computer all the time, with talking into a camera. But the point is, it was very nice. See, when you're homeless, you don't get to socialize with other people, especially in any kind of like opposite sex romantic flirtation sense. You just can't do it. I smell bad. The, you'll see why in a moment. The point is, it was just really nice. It felt good. I liked it when she came in. It made me feel really good. Even if I never talked to her, whatever, I could care less. The point is, it was nice having someone around me, human companionship, you might say, way down at the other end of the lot. But I knew I could trust her because she was here for a purpose. And that felt good. Now, on November 8th, the general election, I went to vote early, as I always do. I take my right to vote very seriously. I was denied my right to vote by the state of Minnesota because I'm homeless. That really upset me. So I stayed there and I filled out the two complaint forms, the state and the federal complaint forms. I got them notarized by a judge. I was there for maybe an hour and a half. And I was on the phone with county commissioners, things like this. I was doing everything I could to try to be allowed to vote, and they wouldn't let me. Because the laws were set in place by the very legislators who contributed so much to my becoming homeless in the first place, which ironically are the very legislators I wanted to vote out of office so that they could never hurt anybody ever again. But they set up the system so that I could not vote against them. In other states I've lived in, that kind of thing is called criminal racketeering. Minnesota does things very differently than other places. I was upset. I was in shock. I mean, in all my life, I've never been denied my right to vote. I ran for public office 20 years ago. I was in shock. I take my right to vote seriously. People fought, they died, they lost limbs, they were blown up, children were raised without their fathers. A lot of tears shed over what these people did to ensure that no matter what, I would have my right to vote. And that was taken away by these suburban Minnesota legislators and taken away apparently from pretty much every homeless person. So, as it turns out, because I went to vote early in the morning, by the time I got all this stuff done, my next step was to write something to the media to let them know. Now, the media doesn't care. The media protects the government in Minnesota, so I knew they weren't going to do anything with it. But it's my responsibility as a responsible citizen to inform them. If they don't want to do anything with it, that's their business. But I can't ignore it. This is too serious of an issue. So I went to this usual place, this hangout, to write this thing, and when I came in, it happened to be noon, so this woman was out there, and there was some other woman who I'd never seen before with her, and they were standing outside talking. And I was in shock, kind of like someone, if they're in a car accident, they might walk over like a zombie, and just in shock and, in total disbelief. And I was in total disbelief. I was denied my right to vote in the United States of America. So I got out of my car and I walked over there, and this woman who's always there, who is a lovely woman, she's like, "Hi," really friendly, which normally would have been great. The problem was I was in shock. So what did I say to these girls, these ladies? I said, "Do either of you know anybody in the media?" Because I was my only thing on my mind was I have to get a hold of the media. There's 5 million Minnesotans who need to know that this legislature has basically outlawed or set the procedure for homeless people to vote is logically ridiculous, if not impossible, for homeless people to meet. Because again, the legislature doesn't even comprehend what it's like to actually be homeless. So I asked them, "Do you know anyone in the media?" And they're like, "No." And I just said, and I was in shock again, like someone saying, "I was just in a car accident." I stood there and I was like, I was just denied my right to vote just because I live in my car. And I was just in total shock. And I turned around, I walked back to my car, and I started working on this letter that I was going to send. And I ended up sending it to the Minnesota media. You know, KSTP, KARE 11, the NPR, all that. And of course, they never did anything with it. They never told the people of Minnesota that the legislature has basically outlawed the homeless from voting, which is par for the course for that media and that government. Now the thing is, from that day onward, this woman never showed up again, ever, at lunch. She went somewhere else to sneak her cigarette. Now again, I wasn't necessarily trying to flirt with this woman. I never even talked to her, never waved at her. I just liked having her around because she was really one of the very few people I know wasn't a threat. And it was a human being somewhere near me, which is something I don't get when I'm homeless. So let's take a quiz here. I'm going to let you figure it out. Let's take a quiz. The question is, why did this woman suddenly disappear forever after this encounter? Was it A, she's offended by people who take their civic duties seriously? Could be. Was it B, that just happened to be the last day that she was in Minnesota before she moved to rural Alaska? Is that it? How about C? She was abducted by aliens. It's kind of the stock answer for anything like that. Or could it be maybe D? Because I told her I live in my car. Which one do you think it was? I'm going to let you figure it out. I have my idea of which one it was. And it's very sad because if we ever had somehow got speaking to each other, and again, I could, this isn't about flirtation or anything. I like flirting a lot, but you know, if I found out she was married, I wouldn't touch that. I do not do that ever. If she wasn't, I might be a little flirtatious, but for the most part, it would have been nice to just sit there and never talk to her and just have her in the vicinity. It just felt really good, again, having someone nearby, especially someone as pretty as she was. It was nice. But that's all gone. Why? Was she abducted by aliens? Is that it? Or was she judging a book by its cover? Only the instant I told her I live in this car did she stop showing up there. That's the kind of treatment I get from everybody. I didn't change. Everyone else did. Alright, if you remember I said that I have to start my car all the time to heat it up. Every hour, roughly. And then leave the thing running if it's sub-zero all the time. Which, of course, now I can't afford to do it this winter. I don't have enough money. I won't be able to do it. So it's life-threatening at this point. The thing is, when I did that all year last year, that heats up my windows, superheats it really, because I'm trying to heat it up quick, and then freezes, and then heat and freeze, heat and freeze, heat and freeze. All my windows are having that happen to them every single hour throughout the entire winter. Last year in February, toward the, well, not the end of winter, but well into the winter, my rear windshield just suddenly shattered and fell, collapsed right into the car. There's still glass shards all over back there. Now I had insurance at the time. There's another one staring at me. Look at that. They're driving from here to there, and they're craning their neck. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, they're driving like the. They live in a home. I live in a car. They see me as a threat, not them. Amazing. So when the windshield collapsed, I could get it fixed at that time through insurance. I had to drive around without a windshield for a while, which was not fun. It was February. It was snowing. It was freezing. It was sub-zero. As winter starts again this year, every time I turn on this heat, the heat makes me feel really good, makes me feel warm. That's a good thing. The problem is, it's accompanied by a sheer raw terror that my windshield's going to crack because I'm changing the temperature quickly. See, when I do that, what happens? I can't even, I don't even know how to finish this. This person's just sitting over there staring at me. This is what I have to deal with. The person who just drove by, this is what I have to deal with. You've observed me for the last hour or so, however long I've been recording. What have I done that's so wrong, that's so offensive, that's so threatening, that it should require someone to stop their vehicle facing me and staring at me? What did I do? You tell me. If I can remember where I was at. The if my windshield cracks again, I can't get it fixed this time. What that means is I'll effectively have no car, and my car will be the same as being outside. I'll have a convertible. That isn't just life-threatening, that is deadly. There's no threat there. Sub-zero temperatures, that isn't a threat, that is deadly. That's a death sentence. Thanks to what Mr. H did to me this last year when I was working so hard for him, I am far worse off than I was before. So every time I turn on this heat to enjoy it, I have to deal with worrying about my windshield cracking. And I wouldn't doubt that it'll happen again sometime throughout the year. This glass isn't meant to be heated and frozen repeatedly, hour after hour after hour, throughout an entire Minnesota winter, which is about 4 to 6 months long. About three days ago, I think, we had a thunderstorm at the end of November, if you can believe it. A big thunderstorm, high winds and everything. It was raining really hard, and the rain turned to hail. The hail was midway between pea size and dime size, so it was fairly big. It wasn't huge, but it was big. When the hail was hitting my car, it was so loud. I actually had my recorder here. I was recording it, the rain, because the rain was so hard. And that part came out really good in the recording. The thing is, the instant the hail started hitting, it was so loud and so violent, it kicked in the automatic limiter in my recorder. And that means that it dropped the recording down about, I don't know, 12, 15, 20 decibels. It basically turned it into silence at the very loudest part. It's to protect the circuits in there from overloading. So my recording doesn't have the hail, and it's a shame because it was incredibly loud and violent. Now, as I'm sitting here with this hail coming down, there were like 3 or 4 different rounds of this hail. Every one of those hailstones could have cracked my windshield. And if that had happened again, that's a death sentence for me. If you want to know what raw terror is, try that sometime. That's something people don't have to deal with inside their home. They might get damage to their home, they might get windows broken, their roof might fall in. But you know what? They're not going to die from it unless the roof falls on them. And something else, when I have the heat on in this car, I have, like things like this water bottle. When the temperature changes, this expands or contracts, and it makes that sound. What does that sound like? Sounds an awful lot like glass cracking, doesn't it? Glass shattering. Every time that happens, I'm terrified. My heart just doubles its rate immediately. And I have to look around at all my windows and see if anything happened. All because I live in a car. Along these lines in the winter, I have to deal with snowplows. Now, there's homeless people who park on the street, which you don't want to do. It's dangerous, it's against the law, there's a lot of problems with it. When I'm in these parking lots, which is where I sleep, the plows are like either a pickup truck with a plow or those little bobcat kind of things. I never know when they're going to show up. It's probably going to be overnight when I'm sleeping. And I have to be out of their way. If I tick them off, they could call the police, they could tell the owner, and somebody could tell me not to be there anymore. I don't want that. So my goal is in advance, proactively, to be out of their way. But I can't do that when I don't know when they're actually coming by. So I have to wait until they come by. Well, if I'm asleep, for all I know, what happens a lot is when they come into a parking lot and they see that there's one car there, they get upset because that car's in their way. So what do? They make a beeline for the car and they basically bury it. they start plowing around the car first to make some big production out of it. It's as if, if because they don't expect someone in the car. If someone comes out to their car, they're going to see, that all the trouble they caused this poor plow person, right? Basically what they do is they bury you in there so that you have to really shovel the heck out of the snow to get yourself out of it. But I'm in the car. So once they shovel me in and I can't go anywhere, then I'm stuck sitting there while they go and do the entire rest of the parking lot, and they're just sitting there looking at me like I'm some kind of a jerk, like I'm a bad guy. It's like, I don't mean any harm. I would have, if I knew you were coming, if you hadn't made a beeline for me and you'd started plowing over there first, I would have gotten out of your way. That's exactly what I was trying to do. I have to deal with this all the time throughout the winter, 4 to 6 months in Minnesota. Do you have to deal with that? Here's another story I called the Screamer. This was last night, right? Yeah, yesterday. Yesterday from about 2 in the afternoon, no wait, from about 4 in the no, 2 in the afternoon until 8 in the evening, there was a guy, a homeless guy, a young guy, tall, big beard, long matted hair like the Rastafarians, huge backpack. And he was just walking around this area, all the parking lots of this area, the strip malls, the grocery store, the gas station. But the whole time he's there, he's screaming at the top of his lungs an argument with somebody who isn't there. And the argument was basically, F you, you effing FF, N-word, N-word, F you. I mean, he only really had those two words going, the F word and the N word, as loud as he possibly can. And he's just walking around this parking lot and he's just arguing with someone who isn't there. Now, of course, that brings him by my car frequently. Now, as I said in the original notes, I can't document these things well because that's somebody I don't want to point a camera at. I don't want to tick that person off, if you can believe it. However, I did have the camera and I held it down here and I caught the audio a bit as he walked by one time. So here's a little audio of what that guy sounded like. Now, it's not much, but you got to understand, for 6 hours, this is what was going on around here. At the end, around 8 o'clock, he started walking into businesses. He would just walk into one business after another and scream like that, and they would tell him to get out. I never actually saw the police show up, but that's around the time I had to leave. The point is, I was just going right across that little street, and then that's where I sleep. Now, how can I sleep knowing that that guy's out and about, walking all around right where I'm at? Not very comfortable. I ended up staying up very late, not wanting to go to sleep because of that. And it's going to become relevant in a moment when I tell you another story. But first I want to point out the potential reasons why this guy was screaming like that. He might have been on some kind of drugs, obviously. He could have been insane, possibly. He could have been, had a mental illness, a psychosis, but he's homeless, obviously, with the backpack and everything, the hair. But he might not have had his meds because of that. So being homeless prevented him from getting the medication he needed to take care of that. But there is a fourth possibility. I don't know, but there's a fourth possibility. He might have been doing that deliberately to try to get arrested. Because if he gets arrested, guess what? He gets a warm bed and a warm meal while I'm in my car with neither. Now, can you blame him? He doesn't even have a car. He's walking around with a backpack. I mean, these are no-win situations. These are no-win situations. My heart goes out to that guy. But I don't know what his story is. And I don't know what happened to him. But I was concerned that he was going to come up and mess with me in my car while I was sleeping. So the thing is, before I get to that, I should point out, in these other videos, I've given examples. I've actually shown videos. I'll put some right here, right now. Something I do not understand. When I'm in parking lots in any place where I'm at it regularly enough where people know that I'm homeless, let me put it that way. You know, So like last year there was another location where I spent a lot of time, and the people just get to know that you're the homeless guy sleeping in the parking lot. When I'm in those places, a large number of times, larger than you could ever explain rationally, when I'm at night in an empty parking lot, no other cars, or maybe one car way on the other side of it, when I'm there, what happens is a car will pull in, and out of the entire parking lot, all the parking spaces, all the directions they could point, they pull right in front of me, facing me, and they keep their headlights on, shining straight into my eyes. And you're seeing examples here. I have no explanation for this. It's bad manners. It's passive aggressive, which kind of helps explain it because that's a characteristic of Minnesota. But I still don't understand it. These are different people. They're different vehicles. It's just natural when someone comes in, only in these places where I'm known for being homeless because I'm there all the time. Not like if I just pull into a parking lot, some random place, this doesn't really happen. But when I'm homeless, so to me, it could be some kind of intimidation. I don't know, but it really needs an explanation. It's creepy, it's disconcerting, and it's blinding. How do you explain this? I have no explanation for this. They could park anywhere in this lot. They could point their lights in any direction, or maybe just turn their lights off since they're not actually driving anywhere. That's what I do. But they don't do that. I have had this happen. They'll stay there for 15, 20 minutes, for an hour. The longest was over 2 hours. Just parked right there with their headlights shining straight into my eyes. How do you explain that? Now here's the thing. Putting that together with the screamer. Because of the screamer, last night I did not want to go to sleep. I was nervous about going to sleep. So I was up eating something, and I had my laptop down here. I was going to watch a video, but I was eating. And again, it was about midnight, so the grocery store was open, but didn't really have a lot of business. Didn't have any business. It's midnight, so basically there's nothing. The parking lot's empty, is what I'm saying. And what happens? A car pulls in around this side, and it pulls directly in front of my car, so close that I could not get out. The only way I'm going to be able to get out is to either do some kind of jet thing to turn, or I'm just going to have to plow right through them. Out of the passenger door, almost immediately, steps out a thug with a red hoodie. One of those gangstas, that walks side to side like an orangutan, like Fat Albert's crew. Doesn't walk upright and good posture and everything. Right in front of my car. A second later, I see this figure get out of the driver's side. It was a tall, lanky, young girl wearing a hijab. She walks around the front over to the gangster, and they talk for just a second. I'm just sitting here thinking, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with this. They switch places. The gangsta gets in the driver's seat. The girl gets into the passenger. He makes this immediate, sharp, violent left turn, turns around, and pulls in right next to my car with his headlights shining straight into my side window here. He's about 15, 20 feet away. Now, what am I supposed to make out of that? Empty parking lot, midnight, and they pull a stunt like that. Do you think they were trying to make any kind of point to me, or were they just doing something random and they somehow didn't notice this car that was in their way everywhere they went? The only car in the parking lot. I'm venturing a guess here, but I think probably whatever they were doing was meant to put on a show for me. And yet I didn't care about them. I was eating and I was getting ready to watch a video. With them on the side, I said, I'm out of here. I drove out to the middle of this big parking lot. I made a U-turn, turned around facing them next to the cart corral, shut off my lights, shut off my engine. And I said, I'm going to just see what goes on here. If they come near me again, I'm out of here. But I don't want to abandon my spot. Okay, it took me a long time to find these spots where I can sleep normally unmolested. I don't want to abandon it. But I have to see, am I going to be safe here tonight? And I didn't know. What happened is what you're seeing on the video right now. For the next 30 minutes, actually more like 32 minutes, they would drive around in a circle right in front of me, back their car in, facing with their headlights right in my eyes. Then they would do another circle, and then they would back in, headlights right in my eyes. They did this over and over and over for about 32 minutes. Now, by the time I figured out that I could probably pull out the camera without them really knowing what I'm doing, I put some junk up on my dashboard to hide it, and I put the camera up. I was only able to film 8 minutes of it, but those 8 minutes alone are enough for you to figure out something's really wrong with these people. What was this all about? They did it for about 32 minutes. And I know that because I started the video when I was in there, and the video length was 43 minutes. It was about 10, 11 minutes off. When they finally left, I I had to figure out, well, what do I do? Do I move back to my spot again, or do I wait? And I ended up, yeah, I waited. I waited to see if they came back before I went to my spot. At that point, I had these people to worry about and the screamer to worry about. And then a couple days earlier, I had had that gang of 6 come around me, the ones who apparently robbed all the cars out there. And this is my normal, everyday sleeping environment. This is what it's like to live in a car. Now the thing is, those people in that car doing this circling around stuff, are, they weren't living in that car. That's a really nice car. That's like a CIA car, one of those brand new black ones with all the trim. I have to assume they live in a home somewhere. And yet people look at me, the guy who lives in a car, as the threat. Based on what you're seeing there, was I the threat, or might they have posed a threat? The people who live in a home. You see, when you make these assumptions about someone, judge a book by its cover, you assume that because they're homeless, because they have this label, there must be something wrong with them, they must be a threat, they must be dangerous. You at the very least have to be very cautious around them. There's nothing wrong with a healthy skepticism. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of reasonable caution. But again, until you have some compelling reason to believe otherwise, you shouldn't assume right out of the gate that the person is the worst they possibly could be. And that's what these people do with me. So there's just a bunch of examples of what it is like to live in a car. It is not fun at all. It is very difficult. It is humiliating. It is embarrassing. It is painful. And when you're treated that way by people, when you've done nothing to deserve it, absolutely nothing. I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying the only thing I have left, since Minnesota's basically outlawed anything I need to do to get out of this situation. I'm trying to make these videos, particularly the business videos, how not to do business, to try to get people nationally to help me out. Because in the 2 years I've asked Minnesotans to help me, they've just left me out to die. Consistently. That's all they've done, and that's what Minnesota does with homeless people. They exterminate them off camera. Again, view the intro part 1 entitled Homelessness to my video series How Not to Do Business. That explains more about this more or less extermination policy. Obviously, it's not a stated policy. I'm basing it on their actual behavior rather than their words. To me, that says more than what their words say. That's all I have on this particular video. I think this at least gives you some idea of what it is like to live in a car. Keep in mind, I am not living in, the Bronx. I'm not in Harlem. I'm not in, the Castro district of San Francisco. I'm not in some place that's known for its active, buzzing nightlife and colorful characters. I'm just in a normal suburban area, and this is what I deal with. Can you imagine what homeless people who are out in those more crazy areas are dealing with? Can you understand why many of them go crazy, or why many of them look for solace in a bottle or a needle or something like that? It's hard for me to blame them. I would never do that, but I can understand why some of them would. So next time you see those people out there, have a heart, have some empathy, realize what it's really like. Don't judge those books by their cover. Get to know them. You might find out that being homeless hasn't yet driven them completely insane. And there might be a person there you can really help. And if you can, do everything you can to get them out of homelessness. It's inexcusable that people have to live the way I'm living right now. Alright? That's the point I wanted to make. I'm really grateful that you stayed this long to watch. If you don't mind, please subscribe to this channel if you like it, if you like the topic. Like the videos. Realize I'm doing these videos in large part to get donations and preferably job offers, something that will help me so I no longer have to live in this car. Because you know what? The instant I stop living in this car and I live back in an apartment, all those people out there are suddenly going to change once again. I won't change. I'll be the same person I've been through all of this. But they're all going to change, and all of a sudden they're going to see me as one of them. Isn't that something? So help me get in that situation. If they're really the problem, which it appears to be, if that's the game I have to play, then help me get out of this mess. Get me into an apartment so that those people, I'm sorry, so that all people out there will finally start treating me like a human being again. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching.